Staff Director from Old Town, Dan Fetch. We are headed out in the autopilots, going to try to catch some lake trout on the jigs. Stay tuned because I am going to try to cover as many of the techniques that I use as I can. Hope you enjoy. Thanks. So the first thing that I do whenever I go lake trout fishing, if I don't know the body of water, is I scout out my areas on a lake map, a chart, a paper chart, online. I use the Navionics. I have a chip in my Humminbird. I have the app on my phone. You can go on navionics.com or just Google Navionics web app, and you can look at the Navionics charts online for free. Do all kinds of scouting on your computer, on your phone, whatever, without buying the app. And when I'm lake trout fishing, I'm looking for humps, drop-offs, reefs, ledges, things like that. Breaks, humps. When lake trout feed, they cruise up and down these humps and drop-offs and ledges, inside turns that come in sharp, and they cruise in and out, up and down those humps and those drop-offs all day long sometimes while they're feeding, looking for food. So that's where I go. I start there. Now, how deep depends on the water body and the time of year. Late summer, like now, it's 90 to 150 feet of water. It really depends on the water body. On Lake Champlain, fishing in 90, I'm in 85 feet of water right now. So I've caught fish in as shallow as 75 feet of water on Lake Champlain, and as deep as 135 feet yesterday. On Lake Winnipesaukee, I go right for the deeper water. Anything over 100 feet in August and September on Lake Winnipesaukee should hold fish. And look for that deep sunken structure, deep drop-offs, deep humps that come up out of really deep water, especially deep adjacent to deeper water. So this particular reef that I'm on now is adjacent to 300 feet of water on one side and 200 feet on the other side. And so there's lots of access, to a lot of fish to get in here and search for food. So that's the first thing I do, is identify where I'm going to fish. And that can be the daunting task if you've never fished a particular water body, because you don't know. Are they in 150 feet of water in this lake, or are they in 85 feet of water in this lake, 95 feet of water in this lake? I know the general starting point for a lot of people that fish Lake Champlain is 90-95 feet. That's their target depth. And then they'll fluctuate shallower or deeper based on where the fish are. It's going to take a little bit of searching. So I have looked for, when I'm looking for new spots on new lakes like Champlain or even Winnipesaukee, I've spent the first 3 hours of the trip just looking for fish, looking for the areas that they feed in. So looking for those humps and those break lines, drop-offs, steep inside turns, things like that. Another important part of locating key areas for lake trout is considering the vessel that you're fishing in. When you're kayak fishing, you want to find the best places closest to the launch that you're going to use, or find a launch that's close to some good grounds. I have some places on Lake Champlain that I fish that are 4 miles from the ramp where I launch my boat. I'm not going to fish those areas in a kayak, more than likely. I have some places on Winnipesaukee that are 3 miles. Take me 30-40 minutes to get out there. 9 times out of 10 I'll just take my boat. But there are places such as this one that are a mile from the ramp where I can get to good access. So finding appropriate structure that should hold fish close to where you're going to be launching is a key to kayak fishing for lake trout. I see some suspended fish down here, so I'm going to drop a nervous minnow down, see if they'll react. Dan did really well with the nervous minnow yesterday. I caught most of my fish on the shad. I got a few on the nervous minnow. So I'm going to drop down and see if I can get these suspended fish. Generally, when I'm lake trout fishing, I'll fish the suspended fish. I will fish the nervous minnow for suspended fish, and I will fish a shad if they're holding tight to the bottom. Sometimes I'll hit them with a nervous minnow too. You can kind of wake them up and get them to come up off bottom. Lure selection for jigging lake trout varies almost as much as it does for bass fishing. It's so dependent on so many things. Angler preference, water body. Some lures work better in some waters based on forage or light, penetration, water clarity and quality, angler preference. A lot of factors that go into it. I guarantee you ask any lake trout angler what their favorite jigging lure is, and you're going to get multiple answers. My favorites are my signature series nervous minnow. You ask anybody that has jigged lake trout with this lure, and they'll tell you that it works phenomenally. It is an amazing lake trout jig. I don't say that because it's my signature series lure. I don't make any money off the sale of these lures, so keep that in mind. They just work. They work really well. And I also love to fish soft plastics, shads, big hoagies, things like that right on the bottom, cast them out and retrieve them across the bottom. Those are my two preferences. Those are my personal favorites. When the fish are suspended off bottom, actively chasing bait, my go-to is a nervous minnow, by far. If they're holding tight to the bottom and they're not actively chasing bait, I will throw a shad or a hoagie, some big soft plastic on the bottom and just twitch it back, jig it back and work it back to the boat on the bottom. Those are my two favorites. Scent, I often add scent to plastics. I do not like to add scent to hard baits. It doesn't come off. It ends up all over the inside of my tackle box. Some of them will eat the paint off the jig, so I don't add a lot of scent. If I'm working a bait slow, a soft plastic really slow on the bottom, I'll add some Procure, is generally my go-to smelt scented lure. One of the other factors for lure choice when kayak fishing is also space. It's not just water clarity, water quality, and what the fish are feeding on, but how much space do you have? You can only bring just so much on a kayak. So I generally bring 3 boxes. I bring a box full of 1.4 ounce nervous minnows. I bring a box full of 2.8 ounce nervous minnows, which between the two of them weighs 15 pounds because they're lead. I bring a box of plastic shads, jig heads, and some 9-inch hoagies. Once in a while 7-inch, but that's pretty much all I bring with me. And then you have your accessories, tools, hook removers, things like that. So if you're in a boat, you can bring a much larger amount of gear. When you're in a kayak, you're obviously limited for space, and I like to keep the weight down. The less I bring, the faster I can get on and off the water, which is nice. So consider that when you're thinking about heading out to jig lake trout in your kayak. I give 1 or 2 vertical jigging seminars every summer. They're very popular in my area. I do a lot of vertical jigging, and I give a lot of seminars on it. And one of the most popular questions at my vertical jigging seminars is, what jigging cadence should I use? And that's a very loaded question because it depends on a lot of factors. Just like lure choice depends on a lot of factors, jigging cadence depends on what the fish are feeding on, the mood of the fish. You really gotta have a relationship with your fish finder so you can kind of identify, the behavior of the fish. Are they actively feeding? Are they really hungry? Or are they just kind of cruising around? The jigging cadence also depends on what lure you're using, but every lure has many different cadences. When I was a kid, my dad used to tell me, he'd say, Timmy, let the fish pick. He'd say, the fish pick the winners. Let the fish pick and tell you what they want. They'll let you know. And what he meant was, don't do the same thing the whole time I'm out there. Just because a particular cadence worked one day doesn't mean it's going to work the next. It may not always work. And the only time you'll ever see me doing the same thing over and over and over again is when it's working that day. Now I have base cadences that I go to with a nervous minnow. I rip it up fast and lower it down slow. I don't let it free fall. 1, because it has a tendency to foul, and 2, because they hit it on the drop and I can feel that when they hit it, the weight will come off the jig. So up fast, down slow, bounce, 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 up fast, down slow, bounce, 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 bounce. That's kind of my go-to bass cadence for the nervous minnow. But some days that doesn't work, and you have to mix it up and up quick and lower it down a couple times, you know, pauses. You just gotta have to mix it up. And when you find out what triggers the fish, you know, what that triggering factor of every lure has a triggering factor, and that triggering factor will change based on the behavior of the fish, and which changes in the location, on the day, the you know, light conditions, water conditions, temperature. That all changes daily. So you really want to mix it up. Spoons, if you jig spoons, a lot of people like to jig spoons. You can just rip them up and let them fall, free fall. That's what they're designed to do. Works really well when you drifting with spoons. I don't drift very much just because of scoping, jig scoping. I don't lure scoping. The lure will scope out. If you have braids, sometimes you get an arc in the line, and you can lose some sensitivity and hook setting power, and you don't feel as many of those bites. So I don't drift as much. Oh, there's one just hit it on the way up. I'm on. Nice. So with the shad, I'm fishing the shad now. I was just twitching that across the bottom. There was a fish down here. Again, my relationship to my fish finder. The fish was down there. I kept it coming in a couple of times. The jig got right underneath the kayak, was just kind of bouncing on the bottom, but he wouldn't hit it. So I reeled up a few cranks and then started going slow, and it hit. It's not a very big fish, but it's all about figuring out what that triggering factor is going to be for that day. And every lure is going to be a little bit different. 4 or 5 pounds. Nice fish. There we go, number 1 for the day. One thing about lake trout is that they love to chase. They love to chase a lure, but they don't always love to bite it. And it can be very, very frustrating some days. Open water or ice, the fish will just chase a lure. They'll come up 15, 20 feet off the bottom to chase it, and they just won't hit it. And it can be very, very frustrating. That's when you have to use some tricks like reeling it away from them when they chase it. Keep it moving so they can't get a look at it. Alright, that one's on the bottom. These fish didn't come in, so I'm gonna reel up. See if I can't get another one on the shad. So, like I said, fish picked the winners. Last 2 fish I've hooked have been on a slow retrieve off the bottom. I'll get it up about 50 feet. If I don't hit a hit, I'll just let it fall right back to the bottom and then slow retrieve up off the bottom. A little bigger than the last one, I'd say. Yep. Funny, some of them just don't fight. I don't know if he's full and lazy or what, but decent fish. Full of energy. Yeah. Hear that? Salmonids are some of the only freshwater fish that can burp air out of their swim bladder. That's a good thing. You want them to burp it out so they can go back down. Good. That's a good sign. If they get too full, they can't go back down. So it's good to feel them burping it out, hear them burping it out. You'll see them burp out a lot as you retrieve them. Dan's gonna take a picture. Good. Lure color is a very, very important aspect of deep water jigging. Certain colors disappear as they fall into the water column. Some colors disappear first. The longer the wave, the color wave, the quicker they disappear. So red is the first color to disappear in the water column. Green, reds, pinks, oranges, then greens, then blues, then purples. So they say over 90 feet of water, the only color that shows up is blue, purple, and then below that deeper than that is UV. So I use a lot of purples and a lot of blues. Now, just because they can't see the color, people mistaken that for not being able to see the lure. They can still see the lure, they can still sense the vibration, but it won't show up as well in deep water. So I use a lot of purples and blues, sometimes green, but for the most part, when I'm fishing in over 80-85 feet of water, I'm going to be fishing with a blue or a purple lure, which is why these purple shads work really well. Sometimes I'll take white Storm Wild Eye swim shads, take a blue Sharpie or a dye pen and paint the back of it blue, the top half of it, and color it blue so it shows up a little better down there. Or the blue Nervous Minnow is definitely my favorite color for deep water lake trout jigging. Rod choice is also very important for jigging lake trout in deep water with heavy jigs. This rod here is a 6'4". This is a jigging rod. It was specifically made for jigging. It's a Daiwa Proteus, 6'4". This one's actually a medium. I have a medium light, and I picked up this medium because it's a little bit heavier. The big thing with selecting a good jigging rod is always select one with a fast action. You want a really nice fast tip, you want to get a good snap, but you don't want to go too heavy on the rod because it will affect your hookup and cause you to lose some fish. If there isn't enough flex in the rod, then it won't be able to cushion those big head shakes. So a fast action with not too much backbone, but a good backbone, good snap. This Daiwa Harrier, this is a medium heavy. It's about as heavy as I would go for lake trout, just because there isn't enough bend to cushion those big head shakes, especially on some of the bigger fish. Now, if I was fishing for 45, 50 pound lake trout, I'd consider an extra heavy. If I was fishing with bigger, maybe a 10-ounce jig or something, I'd go with an extra heavy rod because it will handle those big jigs. So it's a delicate balance between making sure the rod can handle the lure, the weight of the lure that you're using. You don't want to go too light because it will load up the rod and it will affect your sensitivity and lure control. But you don't want to go too heavy because then you'll have a hard time cushioning those big head shakes. For line, I like to run a 30-pound braid. This is Daiwa J-Braid X8 Grand. It's a really good all-around braid. It's good for vertical jigging and casting, which not a lot of braids are. And then I run a fluorocarbon leader, and the strength of the leader depends on the size of the fish I'm targeting. So when I come up to Lake Champlain, I usually run 12 or 15-pound fluorocarbon leaders, about 6 feet. They'll get shorter as you switch more and more lures, or check the line for abrasions after you hook a fish. Sometimes their teeth will nick the line. I usually change out, I'll cut off that section and retie. So they get shorter, so I start off with about 6 feet. And then when it gets down to around 3 feet, I'll add a new leader, 6-foot leader. Fishing in Lake Winnipesaukee, we generally fish 8, no heavier than 10-pound leaders. I don't run swivels or snaps. I tie direct to my lures. I like the control that it gives me on the lure. Some people like a swivel or a snap. I don't. In the excitement, I end up reeling them up into the guides and cracking the tip. So I do not run a swivel or a snap. Pretty good fish. It's amazing how fighting one fish will attract so many other ones.
I know.
They come right in.
Yeah, my sonar's lighting up right now.
I got a good fish on here, guys. And there's a ton of fish on the bottom now. Really active. It's a late morning bite here the last couple days. we'll take it. This might be one of the better fish for me of the trip. It's down 60 feet. I'm having trouble gaining on it. Still down 45 feet. Don't see any color yet. Oh, there's some color. Yeah, nice fish. I don't think it'll be my biggest of the trip, but it's a good one. Oh, it's pretty close. It's a pretty big fish. Oh, yeah. Nice. Hello. Bladder's full.
Sweet.
It is, folks. It's a nice one. Bye-bye.